Alright lads, it's time for some white pills. Get our mind off what is going on at the moment in the US with Biden coming in with the help of over 20,000 National Guard. You couldn't scream man of the people more if you tried. Now I know the title of the video is some free speech white pills, but we may as well get the bad stuff out of the way first. So, the bad news is that the sacked Eton teacher that I covered in a few videos back in December, he lost his appeal as the college upheld the decision to axe the tutor in a toxic masculinity lecture row, despite the uproar from pupils. So, after the article goes through some details about the proceedings, which I've already gone through in previous videos, it says, today Mr. Henderson told parents in a letter that Mr. Nolan's sacking was regrettable and called on staff to continue positive dialogue between those who hold opposing views. Of course, the risk now is that they can get fired or expelled. Meanwhile, the Free Speech Union described the ruling as a betrayal of the school's history and vowed to take the fight to Parliament, which I completely agree with. It also goes on to say, in a statement the union said, the Free Speech Union is disappointed to learn that Eton's governing body has decided to uphold the decision to sack our member, Will Noland. No teacher should lose his or her job for challenging ideological orthodoxy, least of all a teacher at Eton. This is a betrayal of the school's 580-year history of encouraging its pupils to think critically and independently about difficult questions. The Free Speech Union will be referring Eton's trustees to the Charity Commission and the Attorney General for failing to discharge their duty to protect Eton's reputation and to ensure it is pursuing its charitable object, which is to advance education for the benefits of its students. In addition, the Free Speech Union will be working with its supporters in the House of Commons to amend the Equality Act 2010, which at this point I'd rather just get rid of it. But there's not too much more there of note, at least beyond what I have already gone through in previous videos. And, well, I've spent about a minute on a black pill, so I may as well move on to the white pills. So, first white pill of the day. Statues to get protection from baying mobs. This is news that I have wanted to hear for about half a year. I mean, honestly, all the times and all the bullshit arguments I heard throughout last year basically saying, oh, clearly it's the people that don't want these statues about. Look how much anger is whipped up from it. Just retarded stuff to try and take down our country's history and mythology is just beyond me. But yes, it appears that we now actually have protections in law to protect statues, which I don't know why they weren't in law anyway. Anyway, let's get into the article. The government is planning new laws to protect statues in England from being removed on a whim or the behest of a baying mob, Community Secretary Robert Jenrick has said. Writing in the Sunday Telegraph, he said, generations-old monuments should be considered thoughtfully. The legislation would require planning permissions for any changes, and a minister would be given the final veto. It will be revealed in Parliament on Monday. Ooh, exciting. The plans follow the toppling of a statue of slave trader and philanthropist Edward Colston last year, and a wider discussion on the removal of controversial monuments. Yeah, it's amazing how someone who died over 2 centuries ago is somehow controversial, when at the time he was essentially a hero to Bristol, hence there's a statue of him. And it was way after he died that it was considered morally wrong to hold slaves. Truly amazing and brave of that mob, if you ask me. 4 people were later charged with criminal damage over the removal of the Colston statue, and 6 people accepted conditional cautions over their involvement. It's better than nothing, I suppose, but again, they had to have been charged under the law, so protecting these statues with another law doesn't seem to make much sense, but there we go. In the paper, the Community Secretary said Britain should not try to edit or censor its past. Full agree. Mr. Jenkin said any decision to remove heritage assets in England would require planning permission and a consultation with local communities, adding that he wanted to see a considered approach. And I agree, I think you should be able to remove statues if the local community wants it, in some sort of referendum or something, I guess. I don't know, I'm not looking at the logistics. He wrote, our view is to be set out in law, that such monuments are almost always best explained and contextualised, not taken and hidden away. Mr. Jenkin added that he had noticed an attempt to set a narrative which seeks to erase the past of the nation's history, saying it was at the hand of the flash mob or by the decree of a cultural committee of town hall militants and woke worthies. I completely agree. Thank God this man has this job. He's doing everything he can, he seems, to protect the statues, and this is the exact type of thing I want. It will protect the statues that are wanted, and will get rid of the ones that generally aren't wanted, in a very civilised manner, which is what we should have in this country. The BBC then reminds us of why these statues were attacked. The death of George Floyd, while in the custody of police in Minneapolis, sparked anti-racism protests across the world. Again, at least they're not saying the murder of George Floyd, I guess. At least they're just calling it a death, because it is. During largely peaceful demonstrations in the UK, top kek, the controversial Colston statue was dumped into Bristol Harbour, and a memorial to Sir Winston Churchill was vandalised with the words, "Was a racist." Yes, I've covered all these in a video, and I still find these disgusting. Speaking in June, Prime Minister Boris Johnson said, "The statue of Winston Churchill in Parliament Square is a permanent reminder of his achievement in saving this country and the whole of Europe from a fascist and racist tyranny. It is absurd and shameful that this national monument should be at risk of attacks by violent protesters." Yes, he sometimes expressed opinions that were, and are, unacceptable to us today. But he was a hero and fully deserves his memorial, which is fine. That's a fine thing to say. But I wouldn't even give them the credence of he said racist things or anything like that. Because ultimately it doesn't matter. When we put someone up as a statue, we are not doing it for the bad things they did. We are doing it because they should be mythologized as a kind of hero, which is exactly what these statues are for. But then the BBC goes into the cucks of Bristol, saying we deserve this self-hate, essentially. I can't think of a better word for it. So the Society of Merchant Venturers, the Bristol charity which runs institutions named after Edward Colston, said it was right that the statue was removed, along with other memorials to a man who benefited from trading in human lives. Of course, this was, again, completely normal for the time, and this is what everyone who was involved in the transatlantic trade did. And yes, it was wrong. We agree with that now. Did they at the time? Of course they didn't, because the alternative was these people got executed. They said it was part of acknowledging Bristol's dark past and building a city where racism and inequality no longer exist. Well, racism fine, but inequality? Good luck. Following the toppling of the statue, Colston's girls' school changed its name to Montpellier High School, and the city's Colston Hall music venue is now known as the Bristol Beacon. Great, well done. What have you actually achieved with this? All you have done is taken the man's name out of everything. He is no longer remembered. And as much as you keep saying, yeah, well, he deserved it, he was involved in the slave trade, everyone was before 1803. So don't give me this. A statue of a Black Lives Matter protester was placed on the empty plinth without permission in July and was removed shortly afterwards. And we're talking hours afterwards. It was pretty quick, actually. But yeah, that's pretty much the whole story of Bristol, which we've gone through before. So there you go. It appears that my video, Britain Defend Your Statues, has made it all the way to Parliament and is being passed into law. And luckily, this isn't the only bit of good news we've had today. Next, we have a speech from David Davis to introduce a bill to protect free speech. Let's give it a listen.
While in the UK we theoretically have laws protecting freedom of speech, in practice they're buried in education acts, resulting in the protections not being widely known and universities not always upholding their duties.
I mean, bam, good start already. I completely agree. It seems to be that people don't know their rights to freedom of speech, and people seem to get cancelled on a whim. And I do believe it is a university's duty to uphold people's right to speak, regardless of how unpopular the opinion of said speaker is.
That's why I'm proposing this bill. So what does the bill set out to do? It would in effect make universities responsible for upholding free speech throughout their campuses. Freedom of speech is not, of course, absolute. With rights come responsibilities, so speech that was illegal would, of course, be forbidden. Incitement to violence, for example.
Again, yeah, I am totally with him. I don't like the whole line of with speech comes responsibility. I think it gives off the wrong impression because it's what a lot of people who say, oh, you said something offensive, get cancelled say. I'm actually pretty sure it's what the sheriff said to Count Dankula when he was in court, basically saying, oh, you have responsibilities not to offend people with your jokes. Hence he got hit with a fine that he literally couldn't appeal, it seems. So I'm totally behind this move by David Davis, and I would also ask that he please appeal to remove Section 127 of the 2003 Communications Act, because that's what got Count Dankula his fine.
But speech that's merely unpopular with any sector of the university would not be proscribed. Controversial views would not be proscribed. The challenging of established positions would not be proscribed.
This is excellent. This is total freedom of speech and freedom to basically speak out against power, because that is the issue we have at universities these days. People are essentially cancelled for speaking out against what is established as the mainstream culture of universities, i.e. you speak against feminism, banned. You speak against trans people, or the trans ideology I should say, banned. You happen to be Tommy Robinson, banned. So this seems like a perfect step which I've been asking for 2 years.
Whilst we may not agree, whilst we may not approve of what's being said, the right to free speech is the foundation stone of our democracy. To stand idly by while this foundation is being eroded is a dereliction of our duty.
Again, completely agree, and it annoys me that barely any MP seems to agree with him. If you remember back in the days of the Liberalists, I know, Top Keck, we had a letter writing campaign to MPs, and pretty much every Labour MP had a template that they replied to people with, basically saying, yeah, freedom of speech is a cornerstone of our democracy, and yet they all thought that Count Dankula's freedom of speech was not worth protecting. And it'll be the same here as well. I don't know whether this will pass, but my God, I hope it does. Because it's ridiculous that people can be fired for making a YouTube lecture.
This bill makes it the absolute duty of every university authority to protect that most fundamental of our freedoms, the right to free speech. I beg to move.
I mean, it's a good step in the right direction, as I say. It seems to just be within universities for now, but I would put this to everything that is funded publicly. Which with universities, they are essentially funded publicly. Student loans and all that, most of them just get written off, and majority of it is paid out of the public purse. So I think everywhere that is paid for by the public should also be held to these standards. When it comes to private property, not so much, as obviously it is up to the property owner who is and is not allowed on their property. Seems simple enough to me. So finally, we also have a Times article that goes on about universities and is another lovely white bill. Sir Michael Barber in free speech plea to stop university groupthink. I love it. Universities are guilty of groupthink and must do more to protect freedom of thought, the ongoing chairman of the Office for Students says. Based. Sir Michael Barber, who was brought back to Downing Street last week to oversee reforms at Whitehall, criticised vice-chancellors who dismissed concerns about free speech on campuses. Applicants are turned down too often because of concerns with cultural fit, rather than research or teaching ability. The case for free speech within the law in higher education settings should be made with the same vigour as the case for diversity, Sir Michael says. Indeed, diversity of perspective is a fundamental part of an inclusive higher education environment. Yes, I completely agree, and I'd go a step further and say we should completely ignore any calls to have more diverse people. Diversity of thought is the only thing that should matter in universities. I think that is a very good way to keep everyone on the tip of their toes when it comes to their ideas and defending them, rather than just kicking anyone out who would not be, as he says, a cultural fit. Speaking in a personal capacity at King's College London tonight, he will say that universities must create a pluralistic and dynamic intellectual culture, and university leaders in particular need to guard against conscious or unconscious groupthink when it comes to academic appointments. Again, I completely agree. They all seem to be, both consciously and unconsciously, against any sort of conservative viewpoints, let's say. Vice-chancellors have a responsibility to foster an open-minded culture, he says, avoiding the pitfalls of rigid intellectual orthodoxy, groupthink, and won't-fit-in here mindsets. If universities come to be seen as intellectually intolerant hothouses for mono-perspectives, they will not thrive nor represent society. I mean, we're already there, let's be fair. There is already a mono-perspective in universities. They're not particularly thriving at the moment and giving out useless degrees, and they definitely do not represent society. Moreover, universities certainly do not have a monopoly on good ideas, reasoned thinking, and high-quality teaching. Hence, I left university and made my own YouTube videos. The article goes on. Ministers have warned about attacks on free speech after notable incidents of speakers being no-platformed or having invitations revoked after protests on campus. Last March, UN Women Oxford, a society at Oxford University, cancelled a speech by the former Conservative Home Secretary Anne Marud half an hour before it was due to start. Wow. Students had criticised her role in the Windrush scandal. Oxford University and Gavin Williamson, the Education Secretary, condemned the cancellation. Well done. What have you done about it? Oh, nothing. David Davis have to do your bloody job for you. In February, Mr. Williamson had said that universities must take action on the trend or ministers would. That's a good warning. It's taken nearly a year for any action to come about. Some academics have said that complaints about free speech are a distraction and a right-wing myth, with very few speakers disinvited. Yeah, but every single one of those, majority of those speakers are right-wing. I wouldn't say Judith Butler, I think, got cancelled once as well, and she's definitely left-wing. But you get the point. There is absolutely a deplatforming epidemic that has gone on in universities for quite some time. So Michael said that vice-chancellors should gather evidence if they wanted this argument to be accepted, saying, "I'm often told that the vast majority of such possibly controversial speaking engagements do in fact go ahead. I am willing to believe this, but would love to see the data. One speech blocked would still be a stain on freedom of speech, but the context would be clearer." Again, I completely agree. One speech blocked is one too many when it comes to the principle of free speech. And I would like to see concrete data on exactly which side is getting cancelled more. Because they say it's a right-wing myth. No, people have obviously been cancelled, as we have seen in this Times article alone. They mention Amber Rudd, but I could think of a lot more people. Such as mentioned before, Tommy Robinson, Jermaine Greer, Katie Hopkins, and many, many more. I mean, I'll link this website that has the banned list. And it's basically kept a record of every case they've found of speakers being banned or times Antifa turned up to, try and stop a speaking arrangement going on like they did with Jacob Rees-Mogg. And honestly, they've got quite a few people here, so clearly this is quite a problem. And one that I think should be dealt with, and one that I think David Davis is doing the right thing about. So there you go. There are the white pills for today. Hopefully we will get many, many more. But that's everything I had for you today. So, as usual, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.